Ken Semler, can't get enough of you, back for another week, back for another episode. Thank you for carving out some more time.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me back.
All right, so last week we ran through modular versus on-site builds. We talked about factories, the labor side of the fence, the industry adopting modular more and more. I want to kick this conversation off by talking about luxury builds in modular. All right, one thing about modular, you can go kind of workforce housing all the way up to higher end luxury builds, right? So
Right.
walk me through. Y'all just completed not too long ago a 6,000 square foot luxury build. Walk me through what that process looks like, and I assume it was a custom build.
hmm
But what does the luxury modular world look like?
Well, I mean, there's a couple different aspects to really go down, and for people that are contemplating using modular construction that serve that luxury or sector, what we actually did, I would say, at one level is the customer can really spec unique things in the house. We can do higher end tile work. We can do higher end cabinetry. We can do a lot of that, what you would call trim and detail millwork in a luxury house at the factory. And we can do it much faster than you would ever do it on site, typically to a higher quality. Even I know I don't want to hurt anybody's pride, but even to a higher quality level. And that's what we did. That actually house you're talking about was actually closer to 7,000 square feet. It consisted of a very custom house. It took 13 modules to come together and be set over 3 days to do that house. But what we're finding is people, for example, in Long Island, New York, that are doing their research and finding modular and requesting their house be done using modular construction. And really, there is no limit to the size of the house. I mean, it's really how many Legos do I have? Do I make a 10,000 square foot house? Do I make a 15,000 square foot house? One of the things that's really been, I'm going to say, lost on me over these years, Dalton, is there are the contractors, the builders, the artisans that want to build a really super custom luxury house, and they don't look at modular because, well, I can't do what I want. And what I, have been talking to them about over the last several years is, look, the glory of being a custom builder and a luxury builder isn't in drywall, framing, electrical, and plumbing. That's not where you make your name at. Your signature typically is in the kitchens, the millwork, the exterior finishes,
Hmm.
and yet it takes you 9 months building on site to get to the canvas get the canvas completed so you can start doing all the things for your signature. What if I could give you your canvas in 1, 2, or 3 days, not 9 months, and get you started on your signature that much faster? So could you double, triple, quadruple your production because you're doing what you do best? Because I'm basically, you're buying your canvas from me and then doing what you do.
Yeah,
So a couple options in luxury, but modular offers great opportunities for that luxury custom builder.
got it. And what does that process look like if you are an experienced custom home builder, but you've only done on site, but you're looking to get into the modular world? What kind of gaps are there from a knowledge and process standpoint that you have to overcome or adapt to?
Well, in that last episode, we talked about, that there just isn't that transfer of knowledge, that learning place right now. Um, but that's it. I mean, it's teaming up or finding a partner or a mentor or joining up with someone. I would say the biggest thing is understanding how we transfer load in modular and how the structural part works out. I can do large openings. People think modular has to be, one of the misconceptions is modular has to be boxy. And I can't have big openings because of all the structure where modules come together. And that's not true, but it's understanding how that has to work. Can I have a 26-foot wide opening on a structural wall? Yes, I can have very large openings, but I also have to understand the cost of doing that. Will my factory use flitch plates? Will it use engineered lumber to give me that? Where do I kind of hide it or shove it, or what is that impact of it on the design? Because many times we can make it look like we designed it on purpose, but we really needed something for structure, and you still get very beautiful houses.
Yeah.
by doing it. And that's not something that's typically learned by going to a 1 hour class. That's something that's learned over years of experience and understanding it, or working with an architect that understands it, which more and more are, but we still don't have near what we need to serve the market.
Yeah. How have you seen financing evolve for modular homes?
No, that's obviously with Lima One, that's a good question. Is so in the past, we do construction different. If there's a construction loan, the old adage is you do a little work, you get reimbursed. You do a little work, you get reimbursed. Well, with modular, it's kind of the big bang. Is the factory takes an order, but they want to make sure you have some skin in the game, because 50%, 55, 60%, depending on the project, is the BOM, the bill of materials. And so the factory has to go out and buy all of the materials, then provide all of the labor, and then deliver it to your site. Well, they want paid for it, or they want some skin in the game. I mean, they'll say, "Hey, Dalton, we know you're good for it, but we just don't quite trust you just to do all this work and hope you pay for it. When it gets delivered."
Yeah.
They want the skin in the game, and so that's what the lenders have had to kind of bend their mind around. Is I have to give, say, 25% for a deposit, and I don't have anything for it. And so in their mind, it's unsecured. Now, a lot of the consumer lenders over the past several years have, I would say the last 15 or 20 actually, we don't have those issues on the consumer side. There are a number of lenders that are fine with, they understand the process, they understand the factories, and typically they will fund it at either it used to be they would actually do what we called curbside or pre-curbside. Pre-curbside was they paid it at the factory, just made sure you had insurance for the delivery, and it was all good. Some want to see it get to the site before they'll pay for it, and there are a few still that want to have it on the foundation. As we've started working with Lima One, I mean, that was part of the process, is that them understanding the process now, more supporting on the spec side, supporting the builder developer, how that process, how they're secured. Because that's the biggest thing with any lender. Obviously, you want to be secured, and you're lending. And so we make sure at the factory, it's a respected factory. It's going to deliver, that there's insurance through the process, so that if there is any issue, it's an insured risk, not an unmitigated risk. And that's pretty much how we've grown into it. And we've started that process with lenders now for spec building. And the biggest issue right now is, in a case by case, is when you're doing large multifamily projects where it's 190 boxes and you have what I call that half-born baby. What happens if something happens the 80th box in, and the factory's been paid 25 boxes at a time by a lender? What happens? Where's the risk at, and how do you mitigate it? And those lending projects are still done project by project.
Got it. I'm glad you brought up the multifamily modular. What I guess like what are some of the bigger projects you're aware of that are modular? Like how many units? Uh,
Oh, there's across the country, Marriott has adapted modular construction to the extent that they can find factories with capacity to build it. I would say probably in 6, 7 years ago, maybe even more, they adopted it. Now most of the other flags, the different hotel chains, are trying to adopt it. But I know the first project I think they did, Marriott, was built out of Boise, Idaho, went to California. It was 192 keys, 192 door hotel, and it would have taken them, they believe, 18 months to build it, site construction, and it was completed in 6. So when you do the P&L and pencil that project, they would tell me, hey, we paid $3 per square foot more for the initial construction, but we had a whole 12 months of operating revenue at more than paid for that difference. So it's always, you'll hear my mantra, it's final cost, not first cost. You got to look at the end, look at that P&L based on the full operating cycle. But there's Citizen M hotels have adopted it. There's high rises now. The structural steel, I think in New York, I think 32 stories is the one project. Uh, we can do a lake gauge steel that gets us to 7 or 8 stories. We can do wood frame construction that can get us actually up to 5 stories. And there's hotels multifamily medical facilities. I mean, modular is in a big way. We do a lot of education facilities using modular. And no, it's on the commercial side, it's very readily accepted. And in the multifamily projects, a company called VBS is really taking it by the hand and blowing it out and doing large, multifamily projects.
I did not realize that. It truly seems like there are no limitations on what can be done modular versus on site, right?
Yeah, I mean I mean obviously I'm biased, but I really believe modular is ultimately going to become the predominant way that we build. Um, Single family, it'll take a while, I think, for like the top largest builders because they're vested in the current way of building. It's really hard to change the process, and that's what this is a change of process for most builders and those who can adapt. I think the great thing is for the regional builders who are trying to maneuver around the top 10 builders, modular will actually give them the leg up because as those top 10 builders are sucking up the resources, the sub bases, the supplier network, it'll actually give the opportunity for the regional guys to be more competitive against those big guys.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's change gears a little bit and talk about weather. Right? So, as you and I are recording this, Hurricane Ian is barreling down on the coast of Florida. I think today, actually, it's slated to make landfall. So certainly, thoughts with the crew down there in Florida, and hopefully it's as light of an impact as possible. But talk about what role modular has played and can play whenever natural disasters hit. I know modular played a role whenever Hurricane Sandy hit and the rebuilding there. But what are the benefits and the roles that it's played?
Well, no, it's a great question. Yeah, and my prayers are with the folks, and with Hurricane Ian now too. I mean, it's devastating what flooding and hurricanes do. Um, we worked a lot now when like Katrina hit in Louisiana. There really weren't a lot of modular factories that could support that area. That modular hadn't been as prevalent at that time. But when Superstorm Sandy hit, like you said, it really hit the Jersey Shore, New York, even into Connecticut. It also happened to be right beside the biggest field of factories in the United States, which is Pennsylvania, just a few hours away. And it really gave modular time to shine. And what will typically happen, especially in these coastal areas, which was what this disaster is, looking to be, when FEMA goes in, it's going to say all these houses that were on the ground, we can't have them flood again. If they want to get flood insurance, they all have to be raised up. And I always use as an example. You go to build a deck. If you build it on the ground, it's one price. If you build it 8 foot in the air, it almost doubles. Constructing in the air is expensive, but then keep in mind with modular, I typically have a crane there anyway. And so that was the beauty of during the recovery for Superstorm Sandy. Modular really shined. It was the time that 50,000 houses got taken out by Superstorm Sandy. And the
Mhm.
rebuilding effort actually goes on to this day. But modular really, it got to the point it was super accepted in the area. It was the fast way to rebuild. I mean, on any given day, I could go to Tom's River and 8 crane booms were up installing a house. I mean, that was just how it was. And so modular does give an ability to really do quick recovery. And I think Florida, our factories in South Carolina that could actually reach that. But there are more factories trying to come on board, and if there is devastation like there could be, I think modular is going to be in a position to really support the people and help recover more quickly.
Yeah, it's such a great thing because they're, you know, it doesn't seem like we're getting less and less hurricanes and natural disasters, and the recovery piece is so painful. I grew up on the coast of South Carolina, and I'm certainly no stranger to hurricanes. And thankfully, when I was growing up there, we didn't have any, you know, massive hurricanes that caused major, property damage or loss of life to a great extent. But it was a constant feature every year that you knew whenever you entered hurricane season that decent chance you were going to have to evacuate at some point or another, and then whenever there was property damage, yeah, the timelines on it can be horrifically elongated. And especially, I think last hurricane season, Louisiana just kept getting battered and battered one after the next. And uh, yeah, just building on site versus in a factory that has some distance from it. Very easy to see the massively beneficial role that modular can play in getting a speedier, more efficient recovery there. Um,
Hmm.
how have you mentioned regulations about, a storm comes through and then it changes and says, all right, you need to have everything off the ground from a building perspective. Are there any, I know it varies greatly from locality to locality, but uh, generally speaking, do you find that there are differences in regulations for on-site build versus modular build, or is it once you get there and start snapping the pieces together and finishing the product on site that there's not much difference versus whenever you would just have an on-site build?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a multi-part question right there. It's so we in the factory we build to the International Residential Code for residential construction. So we are building to the same code. Now every state implements that slightly differently. So for example, in Maryland, they might implement the IRC code for modular construction prior to a site builder. They actually make it more rigid for us. Historically, they've done that, say in Maryland. But in theory, the code that it's built to is the same. But once it's on site, now the inspections. I mean, that's the thing that people always ask the question. Well, hold it. How do you inspect behind the wall? Because it's already got the drywall on, the trims on, it's painted and done. How does the inspector on site know that the insulation was installed properly?
Right.
And there is a third party process that every state typically, well, it is different state by state, but predominantly most states adopt a third party process, and they take one of four engineering firms and they delegate their authority to that firm. And that firm is making sure one, our plans are built or designed to building code. And then they actually inspect, have a process developed in every factory to make sure that that house was built to that plan that they approved, which actually has state approval because of their authority. And so that's how we're getting it done. And because I love it, people don't realize in about there's 3,003 counties, parishes, or areas in the United States, and only about half or less actually have building code enforcement or inspections. So if you're site building, your site builder could be building how his daddy built 30 years ago, has no understanding of current building code, and so you're getting a substandard house. If you're getting it built with modular construction, it was inspected in the factory. You know it was built to current building code. In fact, it's guaranteed to be built to the building code. Once those modules get on site, to the next part of your question, if you're going to install decks, and maybe we could or couldn't build the decks in the factory depending on where they're located on the module. But then the decks attached, I mean, we're following the same building code. Any construction on site has to be inspected on site. Any construction that was done at the factory is inspected by the factory inspectors, and you will find a label that says it was inspected to whatever the code was that was approved by the state. And that local inspector can inspect actually the set. In some areas they do. They call it a mate line or mate wall inspection. But if you're adding the decks, if you're doing your grading, your foundation, that is all done and inspected on site under normal, and built under and inspected under normal site built conditions.
Got it. Got it. We have covered modular. We've covered so much, but at the same time, I feel like we have just scratched the surface of this. Um, I say like budding industry. It's something that's so there's so many efficiency gains. Uh, it's such an so much more education and publicity to give to it. So, big thanks to you for being really a vanguard in the space and continuing to push the envelope on modular. So much of modular is in the future, out ahead of it. So much more adoption to come, and it's exciting to see that coming to fruition today and continuing to ramp up and more modular. So thanks for all you do for this space, and thank you for carving out some more time and sitting down and recording another episode with me, Ken.
No, I appreciate the time, Dalton. Thank you.
All right. Thanks to everybody for listening. Take care.